Yeah, every day's a bonus.
Okay, welcome to today's meeting,
Okay, thanks.
this briefing of the 5th of July. Let's get started. Are we on publicly video? Yep. So the first item on the agenda today is the electoral system for 2025 triennium elections. Alana Thurston and Al Ovsovsky. Did I pronounce that correctly now?
Ovsovsky, that's right, yep.
But I did it right then. Thank you. Good with the words. Anyway, you'll be presenting this item. Thank you.
Good morning, elected members. So today I would like to introduce you to Dale. Dale Ovsovsky is our electoral officer, and he will be coming to speak to you about the electoral system for the 20 elections. Currently, we have STV that's been used since 2004. There is also the other option, first past the post, and Dale's going to speak to that. And I'll just have a presentation for you now.
Right, Tato. Good morning, everyone. All very familiar faces, having been through the electoral process last year. So basically, I'm going to look at very, very briefly an overview of the three electoral decisions coming up. The first one is every 3 years, council's required to review their electoral system for the next triennial election. Every 3 years. The second one is every 3 years, council can consider establishing Maori wards if they don't already have them. So we have them, so we don't need to worry about that one. And at least once every 6 years, council must undertake a representation arrangements review. Last review was undertaken in 2021 for the 2022 elections. And the next representation is not legally required until 2027. However, the legislation does permit a council to review after 3 years if it so wishes to. And it may do a full review or it may just simply look at any boundary adjustments. So that's available should council wish to. But the current arrangements, we're all familiar with those. Mayor, 9 councillors elected from 4 wards, and there they are with no community boards. The map there, again, you'll be all familiar with that. On to the first one, the key one, the electoral system. Council is to consider the electoral system for the 2025 triennial elections, and that is to be done by the 12th of September this year. The choice under legislation between the electoral systems is single transferable voting, STV, and first past the post, FP. And currently council has STV, and they've had that since 2004. So that consideration must be done by the 12th of September. Following that, there is a legal requirement to give public notice by the 19th of September. And in that public notice is simply the resolution that council has made and the ability for the public poll on the electoral system should they wish to. And the legislation requires a minimum of 5% of electors at the last election to petition, if you like, council to hold a poll. And that would only take 879 people if they wanted to petition the poll. The public will have until the 21st of February next year to lodge that if they wish to. And if that is received and it's validated, then a poll, standalone poll, would have to be held by the 21st of May 2024. In addition to that, council can resolve to hold a poll of its own volition. And they can make that resolution if they wanted to by the 21st of February next year. And in the same time frame, a poll held by the 21st of May next year, the outcome, or a date specified with the 2025 election. So you could say, we want to hold a poll, we want to hold it by the 21st of May, so the outcome is available for the 2025 elections. Or you might say, well, we want to hold a poll in conjunction with the 2025 election, so it's far cost effective, and then the outcome, of course, would be applicable for the 2031 elections. So just on the differences, probably all reasonably familiar with the differences. I'll take STV first. It's a form of preferential voting. It's intended to provide greater diversity of elected members and reflect all the significant point of views in the community. How it works, electors rank their preferred order of candidates, 2, 3, 4, etc. Bear in mind with STV, you get one vote only. So you may have an election for 3 councillors, 3 members, you get one vote, and then you simply rank those amongst the candidates of your choice. So you can rank as few or as many, so there might be 12 candidates with 3 vacancies. You can rank 1 to 12, 1 to 3, or simply 1, and that's all acceptable. But you must rank them consecutively, so you go 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. But we stop it if you have 1, 2, 3, 3, 4. We will accept 1 and 2, but we can't go past that because we don't know what the preferences are. To be elected, candidates must reach a quota in order to be elected, and votes received by a candidate over the quota are generally transferred to the elector's next preference. So that's overall how as a form of preferential voting. With FPP, first past the post, candidates with the most votes are elected. It's widely used, is familiar, generally easy to understand. Electors simply place a tick beside the candidate's name they wish to vote for up to the number of vacancies. So there's 3 vacancies, 10 candidates, they must tick 3 or less. If they tick 4 or more, it is informal and we can't count it. And candidates may receive more votes than they needed to be elected. So the difference between that is you can get a majority with FPP. With STV, any votes in excess of what you need actually get transferred to your next preference candidate. There are 15 out of 78 councils that currently use STV. That's about 20% of the country's councils. There are 7 district councils, including this one, 7 city councils and 1 regional council. Those using FPP are 63, which is about 80%. So it's about 80-20 currently. Of note is that the Future for Local Government report that's just been released recently is recommending all councils use STV. So that's an interesting recommendation. The second issue is Māori wards. Basically nothing to do here. In 2020, council resolved to establish Māori wards and they must be in place for a minimum of 2 triennial elections. So that's 2022 and 2025. So they can be reconsidered after the 2025 elections. The third one and the final one is our representation arrangements review. This is not required until 2027. So legally, we do not have to do anything, but we must do something prior to until 2027. As I said earlier, council can undertake a full review next year if they want to. They can undertake a minor boundary changes, alterations if they want to, but that's at the council's discretion. The compulsory one comes in 2027. There is a cost, of course, if council does want to go down the road of having a further representation review. Depends on whether it's a full review or just minor boundary adjustments, but we're looking between $25,000 to do that if you wanted to go down that route. So on to our process. We need to obtain a decision on the electoral system by the 12th of September. It's our last legal date. We must put a public notice in by the 19th of September, advising the public of the council's decision and providing an opportunity to demand a poll if they so wish. And then I'd just like a steer, if any, on whether there's any decision or thinking around potential representation review, which I just wanted to know whether that's in the mix or not. Bearing in mind that we've only just done one last time and it seems to be working quite well in my view, but to council to give me a steer on that one. So that's just very, very high level presentation of those three issues. Open for any questions. Sorry.
Thank you, councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was wondering, is there the option of a hybrid approach where in a situation like in terms of the election for mayor, there's only going to be one successful candidate, that could be, say, first past the post, and for the boards where there are multiple seats available, that could be go by STV.
In short, no. The legislation is very clear that all the council elections must be conducted under the same system. So mayor and ward all together under either first past the post or STV. So you can't combine. Yeah.
Councillor Lambeth.
Just to add on to councillor Vincent's question, STV for one candidate, it is basically a first past the post, isn't it?
Pretty much so, yes. You still have to get a majority for the mayoral one though. You still have to get the 50.1%.
Right, okay, yes.
Thank you. Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. Apologies for my lateness. I was having too much fun at work. So sorry, Dale, I missed the beginning of your presentation. My question is, if the recommendation is for STV to be used nationwide, do we have any idea if we were to, if that was the track to go down, when that would be implemented? Because we're already STV.
So the report has only just been released. It's going to be addressed after the general election. So it all depends on who gets elected. I suspect if the current government gets re-elected, it will be taken up. I also suspect if the opposition get elected, then it probably will be parked. So that's just my observations. But if it was to be taken up, it would be well past the 2025 elections. It would not be in place for the 2025. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Naya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just relying on your experience, you have been doing it for decades. What is the most concerning out of two? Is it STV or FPP? In terms of people inquiring, in terms of candidates coming to you with questions, most confusing and most concerning, because this STV is system not liked by many of the councils, and regardless of whether local government reforms go for it or not. What's your opinion?
Well, the whole country has been used to STV when we had the DHBs, because that was compulsory. All DHBs had to be voted on by STV. So the electors were exposed to how STV works. The second point is it is more complex behind the scenes on how we actually generate a result, because you can't do, you must use what was called the STV calculator. It must be done by a computer, and it goes to 9 decimal places. But that's behind the scenes. It's a bit like MMP. We don't actually know how that mechanism works. We know what the outcome is in a simplified version. We do get a number of questions from the public about STV. We did note, for example, Hamilton City Council moved to STV for the first time last year. And they are reconsidered. Well, they were concerned about the turnout because the turnout dropped for them, the lowest in the country at 29.4. So they're reassessing, well, was STV a factor in that? But on the other side, we have councils like New Plymouth that have used STV for 2 triennial elections. They have suffered no difference in voter turnout. But it really does depend on the council, the makeup of the electors, the education that is on how STV works, for example. If you really wanted just a straight answer, I mean, FPP is very, very simple, but does FPP deliver what STV can deliver? And that's a more diverse.
Sorry, my question was not what it delivers. My question was understanding of the electoral and the candidate, which I have found both lacking, including myself. I told you, voted for myself wrongly, because it's very confusing. Is it whether you want three ones? If it's a tick, it's an easy one. And I came across many hundreds of people actually tell, can you help me fill this form, damn form? Because I don't know whether should I go to 7 candidate, 1, 2, 3. So I think that's my experience. Other people, I don't know whether they talk to candidates or not, but I thought it very expensive.
Well, STV is, you know, when you do your campaign around STV, the quote is, it's as simple as 1, 2, 3. So you get one vote and then you can rank as many or as few candidates as you like. So you might have 10 candidates, you might have 3 vacancies. You can rank 1 to 3 or 1 to 10 or anything in between, as long as there's a 1. And I think that's the simple marketing or messaging that we need to make sure is out there.
And lastly, in terms of invalid vote and blank votes, a comparison of, I thought there are more because it's my second time I ran the election. My blank and invalid votes were in like 30, 40. And so I guess people don't understand the thing.
Well, a blank vote, a blank or an informal, they're different things. So a blank is where they just don't vote at all. But an informal vote is you must have a 1. So if you don't have a 1, it's informal.
Yeah.
And also you can, as I said earlier, go 1, 2, 3, 3. We can only count 1 and 2.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. It's confusing. Thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dale, can you give us some enlightenment on where things are trending? We've still only got 15 councils on STV. Has there been an increase in that in recent years or actually a decline? I mean, because the great majority is FPP.
Went up by 3 for the 2022 elections. Far North District, Gisborne District, and Hamilton City, I think, were the 3, maybe 4. I can't recall. It is gaining a little bit more momentum. STV works better with either at-large or bigger wards. So what it says, it's more effective with STV if you have, say, 5 positions. Having said that, of course, we elect a mayor, which is 1 position, but you still have to get a majority of 50.1% to get that in. So in answer to your question, there has been 3, possibly 4 that moved from FPP to STV in 2022. There has been 1 council that moved backwards from STV to FPP. That was Thames Coromandel District Council some years ago. They moved back to FPP because they felt that STV did not deliver what it was supposed to do, and that was greater diversity here.
I guess the point really is there hasn't been a gargantuan movement towards STV.
No, well, other than the 3 or 4 last year, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, councillor Lambeth.
Just one further question there, Dale, and once again, from your experience, we use a hypothetical situation where there are 4 candidates required in the 1 ward, and there are 12
Candidates, yes.
candidates. If you had first past the post where up to 4, they could vote for 4, would that achieve the same result as STV? What I'm concerned about is the confusion, the errors, the invalid votes of people not portraying their vote to the electoral system. If it was because of the confusion, would that achieve the same result if electors could vote for 4, up to 4?
Well, with FPP, it's out of the 10 or 12 candidates, it's the 4 with the highest number of votes that get elected. So that's very clear and transparent. So people can say, that's one of my votes there, in that total for that particular candidate. With STV, that's not necessarily the case because you only have 1 vote and you rank them. And all of your vote, for example, could have gone to a candidate, but only part of it generally goes to a candidate, another part goes to a 2nd or 3rd or 4th preferences and that sort of thing. So it's very hard to say, but electors, that's where my vote is gone. Does that?
But would that achieve the same result if you could elect, say, in that hypothetical situation, if you could have up to 4 votes?
Between FPP and STV?
Yes.
Possibly not. Because STV is designed to give greater diversity by the way you parts of your vote, so that when your vote is counted, as I said, part could go there, part could go there, part could go there. So you could actually impact, an elector could impact on the election of 4 or 5 members.
Yeah, I'm just sort of with the balance of that to invalid votes and people mucking it up. It is, yeah, it's a hard question.
FPP, you're still going to get invalid votes because there's vacancies and they vote for 5.
Yeah,
Now they-
yep.
Okay, I'll have Aaron, then Mike, councillor Aaron.
So further questions just around this discussion. I read in the report that the invalid votes is actually still quite low, STV, so that's correct. So is that incomparable between the two systems? The invalid votes, is that on the same regardless of what system you're
Pretty
using?
much so, yes.
So that's relevant, okay. My other question, I can't remember, so the next person can go.
Excuse me, I've people in line, you'll go at the end of Vera after Mark. So the next one is Mike.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Dale, just really following on from councillor Lambert's question. Is there more of an option of achieving unintended consequences out of STV? Because yes, you have a ranking system, but it is possible, once you get through the quota system, to have somebody who might be, let's say, number 7 out of 7 ranked by you, who actually gets in.
That's quite possible, yes.
Whereas FPP is just.
May not get in under FPP.
Yes.
That is quite possible.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'm just recalling the bitter experience when I actually stood for the regional council a couple of elections ago, and for the Kuiper Award of the regional council, and there seemed to be, in comparison with other wards in the region, a spike in informal votes where there was first past the post for the regional council and STV for the district council. And I wonder if an influencing factor might well be what the regional council is going with to reduce the amount of confusion between the two systems, because if the regional council is still going with first past the post, and I have no idea where they're headed, then there would be an argument in favour of us going first past the post too. Like, I don't have particularly strong feelings one way or the other, but that would be one less source of confusion. Just like Dale's comments on that.
That's a very valid point, actually, and thanks for raising that. The number of informals where you've got a territorial authority with FPP, with FPP and the regional council with FPP, people are used to voting by ticks, basically. Where you've got a territorial authority with STV and a regional council with FPP, you can actually get some confusion and people carry on, particularly, for example, with the regional council, they may carry on ranking or vice versa. So it is a valid point. We've got different systems. We had that with the DHBs when we had the majority of local authorities on FPP and then all DHBs on STV. We had that issue with people carrying on numbering or ticking, with DHBs. Yeah.
Councillor Peniora.
Thanks for the chair. Hey, I'm just looking at the results just as a live example. For the mayoral run, there were only 29 informal votes. So 55, there were 55 blanks, but those were people choosing not to vote. But when you have a look at when you compare that to, there were 5 iterations to get to Karen, Joyce, Paki and Craig. The votes that those voters would never have, their vote would have not counted had it not been for the 2nd, 3rd and 4th iteration that then gave, for example, Craig his vote. So when you're comparing whether, 29 informal votes as opposed to thousands of people whose votes won't count, is it fair to say that single transferable vote gives what first past the post can't give in that respect? Because first past the for single transferable vote, you can put your first past the post hat on and say, actually, I'm only going to vote for one person. You put a 1 in there.
Yeah.
So the voters can choose, and it's about education, understanding how to do that. Yeah, That's my comments.
Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. Sorry, yeah. So earlier when I forgot what I was going to ask, that's kind of part of it. And that was just to clarify the simple difference, as I understand it, between first past the post and STB. So with first past the post, you vote for one person, and the person that might get in, 75% of people may not have voted for.
Yep, that's right.
Whereas single transferable vote, everybody that, there's a larger majority of people who wanted that person maybe a little bit.
It may have an influence on the result, yes.
Because they've ranked them somewhere on the form. And as has been pointed out, you can rank as many or as little as you like. So if you only want the one candidate.
Just put the one in.
The one, yeah. Thank you for clarifying that.
Any further questions? Thank you, Dale, for that presentation. It was interesting, and thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Okay, item 2 is signs, bylaws, cemeteries and crematoria bylaws, amended consolidated general bylaw, draft bylaws. So Virginia, is she here to represent this? Yep. Thank you, Virginia.
Morena,
Yeah.
you can hear me?
Right.
Yes, I can.
Okay, good.
Just, because I'm not that good at the hearing.
Fine, yeah.
Sharp, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right. So today I'll just be taking us through the signs and cemeteries bylaws, proposed bylaws. What I wanted to talk to the elected members today was just to talk about what a control document is, what a bylaw control is, because we actually haven't had one in this council before. We do sort of with our alcohol control bylaw, and that's when we can make those temporary bans in those areas. You know, like, so for instance, over the Christmas period out at the lakes and things like that. So I wanted to really just make sure that our elected members had a good idea about what bylaw controls are and what they do. So as we can see here, the term describes the matter in a bylaw that can be decided later. So our regulations, things that are going to change really fast, we tend to look at using a control in a bylaw so that we can keep up with changes in legislation, changes in societal needs. For instance, our alcohol controls, which is where we, in the Christmas period, we put certain alcohol bans in different places. So you can see here that examples are sign locations, permitted sign types, purchasing of exclusive right of burial plots. Those things can change over time. And one of the beautiful things about controls is that because they have the ability to change and move, the bylaw itself doesn't. And that cuts back any need for council to change the bylaw itself and go through the special consultative process. So this is another way of just making sure that our bylaws remain robust and effective between the statutory timeframes of review. Okay. As you can see, I've included, for council understanding of the framework, I've included the control documents for both the proposed draft bylaws. These documents fall outside of the legal requirements for the bylaw public consultation process, and will form part of the proposal that goes out to council, out to public. So we are only consulting on the bylaws. We are not consulting on the control documents because they sit outside of the review.
By control document, do you mean like the code of practice?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So those, yes.
Yep.
Sorry, I should have read it. So the control documents that I'm talking about today are the signs standards and the cemetery and crematoria code of practice. Those are those documents. But I've included them just to give council a good understanding of how they work and how they move in with the bylaw. So the advantages, again, I've talked a little bit about this already. It's a regulatory tool that allows for enforcement under the bylaw, which supports standardised terminology. It's framed by the bylaw provision, which clearly states that specific matters in the control what they can regulate. It allows too for in-depth rule reviews. So if, for instance, if all of a sudden we have a lot of people starting to desecrate our cemeteries, it allows the people to regulate that really fast and make that change really fast through council resolution. So it would come up to council for that decision to be put through, and then that rule can straight away apply and allow council to regulate correctly. Provides for better monitoring opportunities, and always retains the discretion to consult with public on any proposed changes if appropriate. So what this means is that council has the discretion to determine whether they want to take the changes in a control document out for public consultation. Council is still bound to make those decisions regarding a review, though, of the code of practice and of the sign standards, in alignment with subpart 1, part 6 of the LGA, which is, and must consider the public consultation in alignment with council's significance and engagement policy. So you maintain a discretion to determine using those mechanisms that you already have access to determine whether you need to consult or not. It could be that we're changing the height standards on our headstones, for instance, and therefore that could be just a straight talk to the masonry people instead of going out to the wider public. So that's another good thing about it. So we'll move in, I know that we're into time, so we'll move into the proposed sign bylaw. So as you can see from the signs bylaw that you had, all of the operational side of things have been taken out. We've used the directive that a person must comply with the sign standards, which would be that control document. It enables council to use its discretion to make, so you can determine whether you want to make one or not, to make the sign standards. It lists the matters in the sign standards that the sign standards make regulations for. So council may make, amend and revoke the code of practice by resolution. The reason why that the bylaw itself lists the matters that the code can regulate is to provide public transparency. And what it does is it also creates a boundary for council discretion. So under section 13 of the Bylaws Act 1910, council does, which enables this control document as well, there is a test of unreasonableness. So this, by listing in our bylaw the matters that the code of practice or the sign standards can make regulation around, it closes in that discretion ability, and it makes sure that council doesn't act unreasonably. So therefore, we're fulfilling those legislative requirements. Okay. You can see the sign standards control contains all the operational provisions of part 5 of signs in the CGB, and standards will allow for the alignment of the district plan provisions as the district plan progresses. Moving into the cemeteries and crematoria bylaw. All operational provisions again have been removed. Regulatory transferred to the cemeteries and crematoria code of practice. Again, there's still those same, the directive, the discretionary, and also tightening on that and making sure that council remains and being reasonable about what they're going to regulate around in this area. The code of practice does contain all of the operational provisions that part 7 of the consolidated general bylaw originally held in it. And it also too contains general information, provides, and there's a list of things that it provides regulation for. The review of both the bylaws has identified administrative and approval process gaps, which is really good in that sense. So staff are currently working to address these, and one of those things is the monumental approvals, getting monument approvals and things like that. One of the things that this has highlighted is how do we make it more efficient, more effective for the user? And that's another good thing around the controls, is that it's actually aimed at the user. The bylaw satisfies our legal requirements. The control document, which is our code of practice and our sign standards, is more focused on the user's ability, how they comprehend things, how they look at things and understand things, and how they can use it to ensure that they are compliant.
Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. Thank you. You're answering partly the question that I sent in earlier. But can I just get a bit more clarification around that? Just because sometimes organising a monument for a gravesite is a sensitive issue and happens at a time when people are dealing with a lot of things. So is that, sorry, I'm speaking up. I've been told to use my theatre voice. Is that when, so my question was, is that something that's dealt with the actual monument creator, like the professional,
Masonry, yeah.
rather than the family itself? Or is it the family or the person that's booked the grave who actually needs to come and talk to council? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yes. So I'll let Jess talk to that.
Yeah, it just depends on who contacts council. So the family might be comfortable to do it themselves. So we
Okay.
can just discuss with them.
Yeah.
Or most often it is the
Yeah.
masonry though.
Right.
The family just purchase what they like and then they get
Yeah.
the specifications from us.
No, that's good. That's good. Just checking we're handling things sensitively at
Right,
the
yeah.
time. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to the details of it, but looks like there may be a typo. It's on page 31, explanatory notes. Item number 2, bullet point. Consideration must be given to the dispersal of human ashes into waterways that is considered to be culturally appropriate, not inappropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Because I would like my ashes to go in the water anyway. So it's culturally appropriate to go. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would just make the observation, I thought cemeteries bylaw would be mostly dealing with the past. However, the question I have just from a wider perspective, just stepping back a bit further in relation to these bylaw controls is, I'd like you to comment on the where bylaws generally would apply as opposed to district plan rules. Now, my understanding is that generally speaking, a bylaw would relate to public places, whereas district plan controls more relate to private property. Is that a reasonable?
Yes, that's what we've aimed for. So are we in regards to the signs bylaw in this particular question? So that's what we were going for, because we had all of the fictional confusion between Waka Kotahi, which is state highways, the district plan, which was is more about amenity and environmental protection. And then we had our district plan, our signs bylaw, which was sort of going over and encroaching in both as well. So what we tried to do was cut that confusion, draw some hard lines about where those jurisdictions lie, and that's what we've done. So district plan, as was mentioned in the May meeting, the signs bylaw and the signs chapter were reviewed exactly at the same time, so that we could ensure that we created that jurisdictional division between the two. So yes, the signs bylaw deals with public places, council-owned, council-controlled areas. The district plan deals with private property, which is including industrial and commercial signage and things like that. So that's what it was about. It was making that clear jurisdictional distinction so that it stopped the confusion for public users about when they need to go through the district plan and when they need to come through the bylaw. There are going to be situations, for instance, if someone wanted to put a sign in a coastal environment, that's when we're going to need, so they might want to put it outside the public toilets, say at Monganui Bluff, which is a coastal environment, and that would trigger the district plan and the bylaws. However, if it's permitted because the standards are exactly the same across two documents, that was another thing to stop confusion as well. There was no two rules around the sign standards. What's happened, if it's permitted underneath the district plan, well, then they've hit the standards that are required in the bylaw. Does that make sense? So that way you're not having to worry about going for two different permits all the time. It's only if it isn't a permitted activity underneath the district plan, which means it won't be it won't hit the standards that are in the district plan chapter for signs. That's when we're going to have to hit the permits.
Thank you.
Councillor Paniora?
Thank you. Just through the chair, I just want to clarify that that's not a spelling mistake. It is culturally inappropriate to scatter.
Your culture, but not in my culture.
So we're in New Zealand, so if you go back to where your culture originates, then that's appropriate there.
It is appropriate here. I'm not going into discussion.
Just, I'm allowed to, excuse me,
Answering the question.
that was my time to speak.
It was put in there as inappropriate.
Correct.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say,
Councillor, no, can you,
Stop.
just wait, I've got the next question from Councillor Lambert.
Yeah.
Councillor Lambert, please.
Yeah, through the chair. Does this bylaw wipe the slate clean and start afresh, or are there existing use rights for signs that have been there, say, for 25 years?
Yes, so that's that's what would be in the control document. The control document it has the provisions, I think, actually, no, the bylaw has provisions, savings provisions, that's what it's under, savings provisions, and all of those ones that are back there. Yeah, so it starts from when you guys decide to adopt it or not. That's when the new rules would kick in. And so all the signs that are currently legally there and allowed would stay.
And have any of these people who have had existing signs up been questioned about them? Because one of the local community clubs was told to take down a sign which had been there for 25 years, which was now inappropriate.
Yeah, well, I know because so NZTA are running they've been going around, so they're the ones that are if they've got a pink sticker, that's from NZTA. It's
Thank you.
us.
Yeah. Clears that up. Thank you.
Question.
no, all I was trying to say, I'm not getting into any discussion, but as he said, I'm not saying which law prevails, but culturally appropriateness, when is there, it should be permitted. That's all I was trying to say. If it is inappropriate, not in water, it should not be explanation. It should be right in the document. You cannot, as you had so much description as scattering human ashes, sport field, whatever, you could include the water in there as well. But because it's culturally appropriate in some places, that's how. And it is being done in Hamilton Waikato River, just for your knowledge. Thank you.
Virginia,
Can I
talk to that?
Yeah, I can talk to that.
Yep.
So again, this is you're talking about the control document, which won't be part of the bylaw consultation. But however, I would presume that council would go out with the control document for its own singular consultation process.
Yeah.
And that's probably where you will get that feedback too.
Yeah.
And then it will probably come down to how council wants to decide how to move that through. So again, the control documents are only here to provide council with a well-rounded view of how the system is going to work with a control document. So this is just to show you, it's just draft and anything has changed more than this.
Through the chair, just one clarification. So we are making this bylaw to make things simpler. I am always cost conscious. Are you going to employ someone to monitor it? Because there's penalties and everything. Would there be any cost to council?
You've already got a team in place. You've got your compliance and your, you've got your team. So yes, you've already got the resources there.
Yeah, I've got a two-part question for you too, because I've had some inquiries from a number of citizens about a cemetery at Matakoe. Are there cemeteries that are individually owned by council, then privately, then, for example, Maori? Are there three different groups? And if there are different groups, do they have the same bylaws imposed on all of them?
So we have been dealing with Matakoe.
So that your bylaw excludes non-council owned or administrated cemeteries and urukas that are not owned by council.
We're only talking about council-owned facilities, is that right? Thank you.
This will.
Clarification on that.
So if it's been gazetted and it's been placed under council, because there have been private cemeteries that have been gazetted and come under council, this bylaw will apply.
Any further questions? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I just query on the eco burials. It says 4.10.7 that it could be marked more permanently by a native tree or shrub chosen by the council and planted at its discretion. Is there any room there where family could have a input into that, or is that, what reason is that for, that the council?
So at the moment, we don't have eco burial options available in any of our council cemeteries, but most likely, like others we've looked into, we'll have a list of appropriate trees and the family could possibly plant it. Would pick which one they would like, and it would also depend on what's also been previously planted, because we wouldn't want a whole stack of just one native tree.
Okay, so that could be, I guess, changed or reworded for the family to have some input. Because it just says the council gets to, it's chosen by the council and planted at its discretion.
Okay, right, yeah.
Could I carry on?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry, no, just to follow on from that. We don't have any area set aside yet, so perhaps this is a conversation for further down the line, but we don't have a lot of area. So whether there are trees planted or not actually might need to be re-looked at. I know that there are natural burial sites that don't, you don't plant a tree for a person, they have trees there, but it's not here. And the idea of a natural burial site is one of the ideas behind it is that you use less space because you can reuse it. And if we plant trees for every person that gets put in there, then that's going to affect the space. So that's just some feedback I wanted to provide, but I don't think we necessarily need to do anything with that right now, because we still need to get to the point where we actually have some land set aside. So hopefully that's going to happen. Thanks.
Councillor Larson.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just want to clarify that point that Councillor Williams has raised there about this tree planting everything. Is the suggestion that you can only plant native trees and you can't plant other trees?
Sorry, can we speak up, please?
My question was, is the suggestion that you can only plant native trees, you can't plant other trees?
Yeah.
Yes, so looking at other cemeteries that have this option, that it becomes a regenerated bush area. So it's normally areas of cemeteries which normal burials probably wouldn't likely to take place. So we'd utilise them as natural areas. So yeah, we are going down the option of only planting predominantly native trees.
So
Space.
there wouldn't actually be any markings there. It would just basically people would get buried and it would just turn into
Yes.
an area of bush.
It's supposed to be all natural, so there'll be no headstones, which is why they choose that option. Yeah.
Right, carry on.
So the next steps is council will adopt a statement of proposal for each bylaw proposal for consultation. Consultation must meet the requirements of the LGA. Staff propose chat with the councillor sessions of the traditional hearings. We were asked a question about the actual cost differences between the chat with the councillor option for hearing verbal submissions and the traditional hearing panel. Actual cost differences between the traditional hearing and chat with the councillor sessions will vary, dependent, of course, on the amount of people who want to submit verbally. So that'll always change. However, we do know that the traditional hearing does cost a little bit more to implement than the chat with the councillor sessions when considerations are given for transport of equipment, possible venue hire, catering costs, and really the submitter costs, getting to and from. They might have to give up an hour's worth of work. And if, when we take all that into consideration, the costs start actually building up for the traditional hearing. And whereas with the chat with the councillor option requires minimal resourcing, as the council is already in possession of the technological requirements and the staff administration. So that was a question that was posed by Councillor Wilson. So, and that was it. But council must, as you can see, so that was the actual cost. So today, what I'm looking for elected members is direction is sought whether any changes to the proposed bylaw structure. So the structure is having a bylaw and a control document. That's the structure that I'm asking for feedback on. Do you approve? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Or would you prefer to go straight to just everything go back into one bylaw? There's that option. Or whether council agrees to holding a chat with the council sessions as opposed to a traditional hearing.
Councillor Collins.
One more question. The
Yes.
chat with the councillor sessions, is that a panel or is that anybody? Like, is that all of us?
So generally what we do, yeah.
Sorry.
No, generally what happens is that elected members are chosen to create the hearing panel.
Yeah.
And it's those elected members.
So what, councillor,
You can go, you go.
so what I'd like to hear quickly is what members would think about holding a chat to councillors. That's what they'd prefer, and so we can give some direction, councillor Paniora.
Thank you. I have some direction. I think that that's a great idea. It's a good striking a balance between having your traditional hearing panels, like it's a halfway point between us still getting the autonomy to appoint the members of the panel, but not the cost to the ratepayer of the process involved and the hurdles that you have to jump through. Very informal, relaxed environment. I'm all for it.
Councillor Wilson Collins.
Thank you. I agree with what councillor Paniora has said as regards the chat to councillor sessions. I wouldn't say signs are my strong point, but if there was a panel for the cemeteries hearings, then I'd be very interested in being involved. I also just want to point out that the changes that you have made and having the separate documents as opposed to having everything actually inside the bylaw itself makes very good sense. And I just want to thank the staff for taking the initiative on that point, because after your presentation today, it's just very clear that operationally, it'll be so much more simpler for council without having to change an entire bylaw to put a new rule in place. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All I would say is, I don't know whether you had this document as original or did you use any of the other council's document? In terms, I'm just looking at Auckland Council's directions. They have a very clear thing on that. And if you go on the website, it does say about even the scattering, the one you were saying, the Maoris don't like it, but other cultures, they acknowledge it and it can be done with Tangata. So I would say rather than going reinventing the wheel, if you can look at the document which Auckland Council has and try to, immerse it here.
It says consideration will be given. It doesn't say it's prohibited in the current proposed one.
Sorry?
It's not prohibited in the currently proposed one. It says consideration will be.
Can we get Virginia to answer that? It's not prohibited, is that right?
You said concentration inappropriate. I'm saying appropriate. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm trying to make things clear for you. So just look at Auckland Council's.
Okay, let's move on. Any other feedback? Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As my normal approach, I'm reluctant to give too much direction that might be construed as a decision in the absence of a formal council meeting. So I'm presuming that there would be a report coming forward to council with a recommendation, and the two options we have available, which is status quo or what you're proposing, is two options. So they will both have consideration and you'll mount the argument in favour of your preferred choice? Yep, that's cool.
Direction, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Lambert.
Yes, thanks. Mayor, through the chair, anytime we impose a bylaw, it is a breach of people's rights and it starts crouching back on them. And we always tend to bring in a bylaw to protect other people's rights. I'm going to the sign thing and I have a look at the whole definition of a sign. And am I correct in saying that the warehouse building painted in red could actually be construed as a sign in a structure? Because it doesn't actually say wording.
It's about branding, so it's, you're talking about branding, so it could be.
So this could be the colour of a building is painted? Yeah.
But in saying that, again, the code is doesn't form part of the bylaw. So it's two different processes. I've brought them in just so to give you a good general overview of what happens. The standards, the science standards are still up. Even the bylaw itself is still up in draft. So these are the things that we have to talk about and consider. So it's something that I'll be prepared to take back and discuss with the compliance stuff.
But just as a supplementary to that, if the warehouse was to rebrand with a different colour, then they would need a resource consent to paint their building under this bylaw.
If it's, well, no, because the thing with the warehouse is that it's private property. It comes underneath the district plan.
It can be seen from a state highway.
Yeah, so we have made contingency in the district plan for that. So that's what I mean. So when we did the review together, that's what we were looking at, those sorts of situations, because the state highway runs through the town, you know, those and through, you know, right through the middle of town here. And it wouldn't make sense that that would fall underneath the bylaw and the district plan. So that's why, because the bylaw controls state highways and the 70 or less zone, that wouldn't have made any sense at all to bring that into the bylaw. So that's why it sits in the district.
So this could also apply to logoed vehicles parked outside.
For sale signs, we've got for sale signs, there's all types of signs.
And
so that's what's made this so massive, and that's why we had to, when we pull all of the standards out, you'll see that you've got sign standards for standalone ones, sign standards, you know, the dimensions and everything like that. You had to get very, very particular. We've gone right down to the directional signs of open homes, you know, the little square ones that they usually stick in the berm to show where the open home is. It gets very, very technical, you know, and so, but then we've gone and taken out official signs, traffic signs and things like that, so that council do not have to deal with that side of things. So we have been very thorough in looking at every individual type of signs, finger signs, you know, all sorts of things. So,
but one other supplementary question on that, you talk about you've got your own enforcement branch and compliance standard, but that compliance would be done mainly to complaint, would it?
At the moment it is, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry,
Carry on.
interrupt. Councillor Larson,
I think you've been covered, thanks.
been covered. Thanks, Virginia. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One small point. I don't have a problem with the concept of chat with a councillor. I mean, I think that could be good. But do we conceive any situation arising that might actually lead us back to the traditional hearing?
Definitely. I would.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, so in situations where we can expect high numbers, for instance, the dog control bylaw. The dog control bylaw generally brings a lot of verbal submissions. And in that situation, it does make more sense to have one hearing, you know, a traditional hearing setting in that situation. Because we can move generally, if there's a lot of submitters in Mangawhai, which there was, we held a hearing in Mangawhai and one in Dargaville because we had some over there, so that we were able to make those things, make those changes. Chat with a councillor is good in where we can expect verbal submissions to be on the lower scale, which is what we're expecting this one to be as well. And it's just a lot more flexible for our councillors. We understand that you guys are time poor as well. And so we're just taking that into consideration and looking at how to better accommodate to get the processes done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Carry on, please.
Oh, well, that's.
The end of your presentation. Any further questions?
But so if everyone is happy with me to proceed with the proposed structure that I've shown you today, and happy with me to continue with proposing the chat with the councillor for the statement of proposal, because the statement of proposal has to have which process we're going to be doing, but it's just as easy for back. I will present that to council. I'll bring it all to council for decision.
To the chair, just a clarification on this. So would you be going to people before, or you want a direction on that?
I want a direction on what council would prefer. Would they prefer the traditional? Would they prefer the chat with the councillor? and whether they prefer the proposal that I've brought to council today, which is having this control and the bylaw, or if they prefer just the traditional where everything is in the one bylaw. So that's what I was asking for, whether you wanted to change the direction of the statement of proposal, which would be we go straight back to the traditional. I propose the traditional in the statement of proposal for public consultation, or we go out with this proposed one that I've brought to you today.
So I'm just referring to Councillor Vincent proposal that you come back with some more information before we give it.
I'm not asking for more information, I'm just asking for the information to be presented.
Okay.
At
the council meeting.
Formal for decision.
Look, this is coming before us again after our discussion today. Okay. Councillor Howard, one last question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the point that I would like to reinforce, my eyes glaze over when it comes to bylaws and all of these rules and things like that, you know,
Don't worry, I'm excited for us.
Our ethos, this council, is to make things more streamlined and simple, easy to understand. I would like that essence to try to be brought into this, you know, I mean, again, it's a very sensitive, some of these are very sensitive areas, you know, for our constituents. I think that we owe it to everybody, make it as streamlined and simple as possible.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'll close that down. Yeah, thank you very much. So we'll bring in our next item. You can step this for dinner and we welcome Mr. Hanson to present item
agenda
3, which is regarding welcoming committees. Thank you. Welcome.
(34 and 30).
Kia ora everyone, I'm Misty Sansom. I've met a lot of you, so hello to those who I haven't yet. I've recently joined KDC as the Welcoming Communities Advisor, which is a role that is externally funded by MBIE and Immigration New Zealand. So the purpose of this presentation is to give you a high-level overview of what the Welcoming Communities Initiative is and what it involves before I start introducing it to the wider community. So to give a quick bit of background and context, Welcoming Communities is led by Immigration New Zealand and MBIE, and they've funded councils across New Zealand to develop a plan to ensure that newcomers to the district feel welcomed and settle into their communities. And to do that, they've provided funding for 3 years for a coordinator on a part-time basis to develop, implement and deliver a welcoming plan across the district. So although my role is a 3-year contract, the plan itself is designed to continue on without needing an independent coordinator to manage it. There are 31 councils across New Zealand at various stages in their 3-year plan, so we're in really great company. MBIE does a fantastic job of providing support and guidance and connecting the councils. So the shared learnings are really valuable, especially for smaller rural communities like ours. So places like Hurunui District and South Wairarapa share really similar characteristics to Kaipara, so our challenges and advantages are really similar. Immigration New Zealand defines newcomers as migrants, former refugees and international students who have arrived in the last 5 years. For councils like Hamilton City, this definition fits perfectly. They have a university and they're a refugee settlement area. However, for Kaipara, newcomers to our district are mostly coming from other areas as regional migration, with the next highest group being international. So our welcoming plan will reflect our newcomer makeup and be more focused on regional and international migration. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read all of these out to you, but these are some of the key benefits that I will be highlighting when I speak with the wider community and other groups. So for the council, it's such a positive project. It's externally funded, it strengthens community connections right throughout the district. And as councillors, it gives you an opportunity to connect with people new to your area through the different community-led initiatives and events that will happen across the district. The other key benefit to this project is how well it ties into the vision and outcomes plan. So first, the contribution to a prosperous economy by highlighting Kaipara as a place to be is really big. And then obviously it's really well aligned to the vision for vibrant communities. So the Welcoming Communities project perfectly meets these outcomes. A key feature of the initiative is that rather than being organisation-led, the welcoming is led by the community. So we provide ideas and champion what is already happening and empower existing residents to take the lead in welcoming communities, welcoming newcomers in. Being community-led also ensures that longevity, so it will continue on beyond these 3 years. And sorry, the ongoing work is limited to 6 monthly or annual checks just to ensure that the initiatives being promoted are still in place and we can add new ones in. However, the plan itself can be continuously referenced by the council. It will highlight what is already happening that newcomers might like to be part of, and it will give ideas and guidance on new ideas that communities can action. So over the next few months, I'll be meeting with different communities across the district to understand what is already happening and what they might like to start. And one helpful outcome of the project is to develop an online welcome pack for new residents to Kaipara. So a lot of the other councils have taken the opportunity to do this, and this is just collated information of everything a new person will need to know, from rates to rubbish to dog registrations, just all in one really easy place. The outline for what it means to be a welcoming community is guided by 8 elements, which are further broken down into 31 sub-elements. And I'm not going to go into each one, but just to give you a feel for what these represent. So one of the sub-elements for number 5 is to encourage employers to think about what they can do to ensure their employees are welcomed into and settled into the wider community. And for number 8, one of the outcomes is that both newcomers and the receiving community each understand the values that they hold dear. So it's particularly important, especially in districts like ours, that the receiving communities feel as though they are welcoming people in rather than being sort of set to the side. As part of the process, KDC can choose to become accredited as a welcoming community. This is entirely optional. So by joining welcoming communities, we already have the 3 years funded, and the only expectations attached to the funding are reports to MBIE. However, by creating and implementing the welcoming plan, we will meet the accreditation standards by default. There's no extra work needed. It's just whether we want it officially recognised. So the benefits are that it unlocks additional funding from MBIE, the biggest being $9,500 in stage 2, and it makes it easier to access partner funding from MSD, Ministry of Ethnic Communities and other organisations. So this is a 4-stage process over the 3 years. Each stage just has a short list of requirements. So this is the timeline. Year 1, I'm 2 months into this role. So just wrapping up the planning stage, meeting with key stakeholders and newcomer groups across the district. And then from that, we will develop the Welcoming Communities Plan. Year 2 is all about implementing the plan using those 8 elements as a guide to see how we're tracking. And year 3 is about refining and adjusting the plan as necessary and ensuring that continuity going forward. So these are the next steps over the coming months. As I said, just wrapping up the planning stage, and I'm just about to start sending out surveys and engagement, of which I will be sending surveys to you all as well. And this is how you can help and get involved with this project. So if you know of existing initiatives that align well, or if you have key contacts that I should get in touch with, please share them with me. As mentioned, I'm in the process of finalising surveys to understand people's experiences of moving to Kaipara. And when those are finished, I would love for you to pass them on to newcomers that you know. All of that data is really helpful for us to understand how we should shape our plan. And then finally, please spread the word. And keeping the Welcoming Communities project in mind when you're chatting with others is really helpful to familiarise people. And this is including big employers and schools, community groups and so on. These casual conversations really help to create buy-in. Oh, short and sweet. It's me. Questions?
Any questions? Councillor Larson.
Thank you. Richard. Yeah, thanks, Misty. What's the total budget for Kaipara?
0.
I mean, from government.
From government, yeah. So if we become accredited, I can apply for $9,500 of funding from MSD. So that will be used to help community get some initiatives off the ground, but it's definitely not an ongoing form of funding. So it's a one-off.
So how much was it, sorry?
9,500.
9,500
Yeah.
total?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Self-funded,
But sorry, my role is funded to put this plan together. So the initiatives and events that will happen aren't council funded. So the point is that it's community funded.
So what's the total funding that comes to Kaipara for employing people and implementing?
The total funding is 150,000. Yeah, I think, yeah.
And do you know what the funding is across the whole country for this initiative?
Oh gosh, I'm not too sure.
Don't know.
No. I suppose we could probably times that by 31.
Mark.
But just a quick question. I mean, welcoming communities is a big venture in all the councils. I think Auckland Council is probably doing it at a much bigger scale. Would you send some paperwork which you have from compatriot councils as well to give us some ideas into how to go about it? And you will give your email address, obviously, when you send it to us.
Yeah, so I can send you, Immigration New Zealand have a lot of resources and they yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think you've pretty well covered my question. I just want to make sure, like, I'm aware of at least 3 communities that have their own welcome to, welcome pack, what you might call it. So that would complement what you're talking about and you pick those resources up. Like, because to me, the idea of a generic council one, which tells you about rates and dogs and stuff, that ain't much of a welcome.
Yes.
As opposed to talking about the opportunities, connecting with your community that would be available and that sort of thing. Yes. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So what we're going to do to start off, just because we can get this collated really quickly, is have a online welcome pack, which is just online welcome pack, just a collated list of links. And so that's what you're sort of talking about there. And you're right, it's not as I like. But as we go through and develop the welcoming plan, that's where we get more of the interesting, more well-rounded, kind of exciting things to really help someone settle in. So we'll start with that online just because it's very easy. We can get that up and running pretty quickly, but it will be rounded out.
Okay, cool. I'll send you a couple of links.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, great.
I had a real pleasurable day here welcoming a group to our Kaipara. But what struck me was there was quite a few there that I'd actually met years ago who'd taken a long time to actually process an application to be a citizen. And I was also very struck by the qualifications of some of the people that were in the audience. So with our aims to have a place where Kuiper is the place to be and keep our population moving with smart people that come to our district and settle. Is there a good opportunity here to actually look beyond our district to try and promote getting those sort of people, rather than just being a welcoming mat, be someone that actually, a council that can actually promote, come to our district?
Yeah, and I have been thinking about that as well, how this plan can not just welcome, but yeah, really highlight Kaipara as a place to be. So yes, and a lot of that will be how we kind of present what is happening across the district, how we present what's happening in these small communities, especially the ones that are quite well spread out. So yeah, and that's something that I'll be working on as well. So something that I really like about this initiative is that we're heavily encouraged to adapt it to suit our district as we need. And so I'm definitely finding in early conversations that outside of Mangawhai, there's a lot of communities are really needing, young families for school roles and employees for, all sorts of businesses and new business owners to bring in, whether it's new services like dentists or vets to a district, or whether it's, just starting up smaller businesses. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Thank you. Further questions? Sorry, CE Maris would like to have some words.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I just wanted to say there are many spokes to the place to be, your vision and outcomes. It's all slowly coming together as well. Regarding this, I just wanted to point out our economic development lead that you approved in the annual plan. So we're going to start recruiting for that role soon. And that role is going to report to me and will be paramount in bringing all of the spokes together in one space as well, so that there is alignment and that we have clear outcomes and to your vision and what you want to achieve. So the role is to design to get council together in that space. So they'll work closely with Misty as well. Just wanted to give you that sort of information.
Thank you. Further questions of Missy? Thank you, Missy. That was very enlightening. Running late. Do we have a cup of tea?
No, we're good. We're good. Yeah, we're on time. Because we can get into a break and then probably excluded after the break.
Yeah, but the end hasn't been.
Yeah. Let's push through.
Sorry. All right. Before we have a tea break, we'll have Calvin Thomas, NTA, will present an NTA update, please. Sorry? Up there. Yep, and you've got Bernard there with you too, huh? Yep.
Morning.
Hello.
So through the chair, this is the normal monthly update of the ops report. Take the report as read. We do have a couple of slides that have come through in addition to what is reported as an update on the emergency works. Sorry, and just to answer one question that we received on the report around the number of failed audits and the reason for those audits. For those failures. So those audits are our routine audits of the contractor's inspection process. This month we identified several sites where we believe there were defects not identified by the contractor that should have been identified for the contractor. So as is our process, we record those defects, mark them as a failed audit, and that then goes against their performance score for the month. Through the process, we can look at whether we need to audit more of these sites. I'm not sure which councillor.
Yeah, I just wondered, Aims were in the process.
So it's, I think they're mostly on sealed. Unsealed roads, sorry.
9 unsealed.
9 unsealed roads, and primarily where we believe our area supervisor has identified defects that they have missed from their audit, and then that flows into the work that they need to do.
Is that quite a high it said that there were 25 inspections and then 9 of them failed. Is that quite a high?
It is unusually high.
Yeah. And is that due to the weather and different things like that? But
Through the chair, yes, in part, down to the weather. In our report for last month, you might have noted, we took a blanket grade approach to bringing the network condition back up to a reasonable level of service following those compounding weather events and other issues. So we believe there was a little bit of negligence in the inspector's approach, recognising that the graders were going to come through and pick up some of those defects anyway. So therefore, they didn't get identified correctly, but we've pulled them up on that.
okay, thank you.
Councillor Nair?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, we don't have the detail. Do we have the details of 73 sites? Because I was in Awakino River today and there's emergency works required. Is it listed there or not? And the Silver Fern Farms plant manager was there as well. Is it included in those emergency works?
Sorry, we're jumping to the sites. I hadn't quite.
It says 73 sites.
Sorry, I was just going to answer any questions about the report and then we'll move on to the slides. So we'll cover. Is there any other questions about the report itself?
Because we've got a couple of reports.
So this is the monthly operations report, item 5 in the briefing.
Yeah. I had regarding the,
Certainly, you're first in line.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, sorry about that. I was forgetting myself. With regard to drainage maintenance and renewals, I see that we cleared 22 individual culvert ends for the month. So how many culverts do we have in the district?
Next session. A lot more than that. So those were the culvert ends that were cleared under the lump sum, which is the minor clearance. The number of culverts, I don't know off the top of my head.
But it's 6 or 8.
You have answered.
12,658 culverts, including state highway culverts.
Maybe you should be in NTA rather than here.
So this 22 culverts is not particularly significant. So like I'm concerned about how this looks, and I realise this is for a month and there's been extraordinary weather conditions happening before then. But to me, I can recall 40 years ago, an engineering cadet telling me water is the enemy of roads. I think we have a number of the scale of our problems that have happened has been in part because of a lack of maintenance of the culverts and water tables and so on. Can you help me with selling this performance to our constituents?
Through the chair, the 22 culvert ends cleared are the 22 that are picked up through the inspections and routine maintenance. In addition to that, there's all the other emergency works that are taking place and ordered works regarding culvert works, which are beyond the normal routine maintenance.
But that's more like reactive.
So
fixing up stuff that perhaps it didn't get cleaned.
Under the maintenance contract specifications, lump sum immediate items is where the culvert clearance is less than 0.5 cubic meters. If it goes beyond that, then it becomes an ordered works activity. So these are where they're minor culvert blockages that are covered under lump sum. If it's a major culvert blockage above the 0.5 cubic meters, then that gets identified as a priority defect, and those defects has to be assessed against the available budget and program about which ones get done. So we'll talk in more detail about that this afternoon.
So that, yeah, so we're saying half a cubic metre of, so that's a bucket.
It's a scoop out of, it's a partially blocked culverting effectively.
Yeah, okay.
And that's what's covered in the monthly sum activities.
Right, so is there one place where I can get a handle on what the total, how it's cleared?
Yeah, through the chair. Yep, absolutely. We can look to provide that information. I'd just like to add, we've also, through our emergency works activities, had culvert clearing running concurrently as part of where we've been able to identify some blockages as a result of weather events, as opposed to just naturally occurring through general conditions.
I continue, Mr Mayor, just on this culverts thing, you have a team working down Honorary Road at present, and there was some wording in the description which concerned me a bit, as indicating that perhaps we're, let's see, among them is Asset Construction Limited, which is currently working on Honorary Road, a bad historical actor for our network. Is that referring to the performance of that contractor?
Through the chair, no, I believe that's referring to the particular situation there at Honorary. It's a site that is regularly inundated due to weather conditions, even outside of significant weather events. So it is a known site where we need to be responding regularly to the maintenance needs there, and possibly need to be looking at future improvement options to resolve.
Okay, because it goes on to say TDG Environmental are chasing these crews closely, which suggests that perhaps those crews need.
So through the chair, these reports are written in a relatively informal way to provide some context to what's happening. Yeah, and historically they have been internal only reports. For purposes of transparency, we're working with Ventia to make them public facing reports and doing that across the region. We, wherever possible, try and make sure that we review them and try and make sure that there's nothing wrong in the reports. But in this case, it is Asset Construction are working on a site that has had historic issues. So the reference is the bad actor is the site itself, and TDG are following along behind Asset Construction doing other works. So that could have been worded by Ventia.
Oh, thank you, Worship. Yeah, thank just on the, continuing on the topic of culverts. When your contractors get the job of going out and clearing culverts, how are they paid? Are they paid per culvert or by the hour, or does it work?
It depends. So the lump sum ones are obviously part of the lump sum. So that's the activity itself as part of their monthly lump sum. But when it comes to order works, then it can probably better describe that.
Oh, okay, because the lump sum's just clearing the culvert entrance, not actually unblocking the culvert under the road crossing.
So through the chair, in response to that, as Calvin pointed out, yep, so the 0.5 cubic metre, that's our lump sums. We then pay audit works, so day work rates under the contract for culvert clearing beyond that. But then we have a set rate per barrel for culvert flushing. So it's a per flush unit rate.
Okay, so per culvert. So if they only do one culvert and it takes them 2 days, they can pay for one culvert.
For purposes of efficiency though, if they're doing ordered works and they take half a metre of, sludge out of both end, but the culvert's blocked, if they've already got traffic management set up, etc., you've got men and machines there, sure you'd want to do the entire culvert, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yep, through the chair. So exactly, that's, I guess, highlighted in the report with this example on Honorary Road, where ACL are going through doing that culvert in clearing, and then TDG are actually the contractors who undertake the flushing work, and they're following on directly behind to make use of that single traffic management setup.
Okay, Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I feel, as most of our councillors will feel, is a disconnect between the council and NTA in terms of holding the contractors to account. The constituents don't like the way they operate, and Mr. Mayor has given you an example. Would you look at improving that part that there's more accountability for contractors, the big names, in terms of with the council in improving their performance. Because you check only like 10% of the work, isn't it? You don't do, you just give them a free play to the contractors, don't you?
Through the chair, the contract outlines the specifications of each activity. The role of the principal being council and our staff is to go out and audit a minimum of 10% of those activities.
Yeah.
Yep, which is standard practice across all principals in the industry. Part of that is if we identify within that 10% a high failure rate, then we need to look at doing further or an increase.
Thank you for that, Kevin. All I'm trying to say is how we can improve this process. I'm not going by the books in the ministry and all. As a council, because our Kaipara is very open council, right? We actually talk to constituents and they don't like the way it's being functioned. They want more accountability for contractors. And I would like you to comment on that, how you can do that. Thank you.
So through the chair, we are active in the field and chasing the contractors. The reason I'm hesitant in answering this is we have a significant paper on this exact subject this afternoon. And I suggest through the chair that the most appropriate place to have that conversation is at that point.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So just our update on emergency works and coming back to Councillor Nair's question. So at the moment, we're approaching 28 million as outlined in below in terms of the compounding effects of the 22-23 events. That with a small event relatively in June, we had 12 individual discrete emergency work events across the region and about 9 of those impacted Kaipara. So as you can see, the ones pre-Gabriel were minor, but Gabriel and Mangawhai make up the majority of Kaipara's damage in 26 million. To date, we've completed 5.7 million of those works, which is the phase 2, with phase 2 being phase 1 is immediate response, that was all dealt with. Phase 2 is the sites of low complexity under 100,000, also includes some of the culvert clearance works, water table works that Bernard was talking about. And those are the activities that are subject to the plus 40% financial assistance rate funding. Because that funding had a time-bound constraint on it initially to get as much work as we could do done by June, that was the initial focus. Those have been now, that time bounding has now been extended. So we're rephasing the plan on much more priority site-based.
Is there another end date to that extension, Colin?
Not as yet, through the chair. The letter is quite open-ended in the fact that it says it has been extended beyond the June date with the addition, because it originated from a $250 million government funding to Wakatahi to support it. That funding has been further extended. And with all our conversations, we're seeking assurance that it covers all phase 2 works, in saying that we expect to have Kaipara's phase 2 works completed by the end of August, which should be well inside that envelope. What we're continuing discussions with Wakatahi at the moment about how that plus 40% can be extended beyond phase 2 to cover the local share component of the more complex phase 3 sites, which are obviously more expensive. So we have completed 457 dispatches in that phase 2 of 848, so about halfway through the process. And for the complex phase 2 sites and the definite geotech phase 3, where we have issued the instruction to our geotech consultant to do the initial emergency works assessments. So what that is a site visit to identify repair options. Those generally come back as 3 options, ranging from do nothing, do minimum to preferred approach. From that, they're assessed in terms of what's best for network and affordability. And also in some cases, when you've got multiple sites across a single road, combining what's best for that actual road. They then informed the funding application to Waka Kotahi for those sites. That then feeds into the formal geotech design for the complex. But also what we find is out of that, we identify another subset that can be actually given directly to contractors as phase two confirmed that they can then go out and get fixing. So it's a iterative process of the repair needs. So there's 73 sites, as pointed out in Kaipara. The full list of sites are provided in that fortnightly report that Jason distributed the latest version last Monday, I believe. So if you have a question about a specific site, we'll need to go to that report to see if it's there. When it comes to how we're delivering these works, we have worked with each of the contractors and Ventia and Kaipara to make sure that in the efforts of expediencies, we're not just using their resources to complete these works, and have lifted the contractual requirement 30% to 50% minimum for small, medium enterprise. And at the moment, including the purchase of local quarries and the likes, that's running at 79%. So through the phase two works, very much like when we did the worker redeployment a couple of years ago, Ventia's role is more a management and coordination and health safety compliance and facilitating these works being done by other local contractors.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Calvin, just going back to your previous slide and your comments about when you get the geotechs out and they've got the three options. Two of which seem rather negative, you know, the first two. Can you give us off the cuff the key criteria that will establish, that you use to establish what is a priority?
Okay, so through the chair, bit of a big question to respond to because the criteria used is quite broad. But we look at everything from the use of the road, the required width of the road based on that use. We consider the traffic loading. We consider the soil type, nature of the surrounding geology, whether that's going to play into part, whether a do minimum approach would provide enough longevity out of the repair versus something more significant. There's a number of factors we consider. Part of the process and the reason for these EWAs is we also have to have that same conversation with Waka Kotahi as our funding partner. And those are sort of the questions they want to ask and float and test with us as well. So there's quite a bit involved in that process.
Okay, so it is possible, sorry, supplementary, Your Honour, it is possible that some of these roads, projects may not get to be done for months, if not years. You know, you work down the priority list. And it's good that, you know, traffic volumes and importance of the road in terms of a national, regional network is, you know, taken into account, presumably up front.
Through the chair, generally in our normal programs, we would repair, or in the programs, we would repair 12 to 14 significant slips annually across the region. At the moment, we're looking at about 300 across the region and 70 odd in Kaipara. We're looking, obviously doing 12 or 14 a year isn't an acceptable way of getting through this backlog. So we're looking at two ways of approaching that. The first way is how we address the geotech, because one geotech normal company going around and doing assessments is not going to get round all of them in a period of time. So following the EWAs, we're going to be looking at establishing a geotech panel of all geotech providers in Northland to actually, I guess, farm out, for lack of a better word, the geotech coordination, and then use a spot peer review process to make sure we're getting consistent outcomes. following that, we're looking at establishing panels based on repair types in the contractor industry to make sure that we can get packages of work out to the industry based on the types of repairs. So historically, we've kind of put slips together based on location, but we're looking at doing types of repairs, bundle them up based on the competency of the contractor and skill set. And that is likely to involve usage of everyone from tier 2 and tier 3 contractors right through to potentially some tier 1 contractors with some larger packages who aren't even in Northland at the moment.
May I? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So from that, and this is related to the broader Northland. And from your learnings, I'd be interested to know how many slips you've actually had to deal with specifically in the Brynderwyns. And what knowledge and learnings you're getting out of that to put to these guys at NZTA about a potential long-lasting solution for that part of the road.
So through the chair, Brynderwyns specifically being state highways, we're not involved in their slips. In terms of the repair about a long-lasting solution, there's been 2 series of stakeholder workshops held with Waka Kotahi and.
There's one today as well.
There was that. Waka Kotahi are pulling together a package of short, medium and long-term works recommendations to put in front of the minister at the end of this month as part of the Resilience Fund that was recently announced. That package ranges from short-term improvements like detour signage and improvements to the likes of Paparoa Oakley and Cove Road, Kaiwaka Mangawhai routes. More medium-term improvements to build the resilience of the Brynderwyns, and then the longer term of looking at options of a potential Brynderwyns bypass. So those are being looked at and costed at present, but they will need the intent is for that to go to the new Transport Minister at the end of the month for assessment and approval.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question too. We've got some dreadful inverted jarabars in the district, in other words, potholes. So that the first question is, are there times when you just throw some stuff at them and then you look at the long-term fix later, simply because it's a threat to people's mechanical state of their cars? And are we getting, I read in the paper the other day that someone took NTA for quite a bit of money for their vehicle. Are we getting claims in our district against the council for damage?
Through the chair, just to clarify, it was NZTA who got taken to court. But we have not received any recently, as I understand it. We haven't seen any recent claims. To your first point, particularly through winter, it is a fill and hold approach taken to try and fill the potholes, that it's not suitable weather conditions. The other thing that we're finding at the moment right across the network is with the extremely short construction period last year because of weather, so we had 5 weeks rather than the usual 4 to 5 months. A number of sections of road that were down to be rehabilitated or resealed were unable to be done, which means we're now progressing into a winter season with roads in a less than desirable condition in those states. So we are having to hold them through winter through temporary repairs.
The other part of the question I've got to ask is, in some of these, because of the impacts of such severe weather, are some of these potholes that we are seeing, can they be claimed under emergency works or not?
Through the chair, technically not, and it's a bit of a complicated funding thing. So pothole repairs are included under the contract lump sum. So contractors go out and it's in their best interest to do as best temporary repair as they possibly can, because then they don't have to go back to it. We have received funding for the specific routes of Paparoa Oakley and Cove Road, Kaiwaka Mangawhai, to recognise the increased level of deterioration on those 2 roads. Yes, there is additional funding.
Thank you, Councillor Nair.
Well, I'm not repeating the potholes. You don't have any rapid response team for potholes because there's one for 3 days as you come to this lighthouse function as well. But in terms of identification of emergency works, are you able to at some point, because as I said, I was trying to refer to that particular flooding site, which nobody is caring about it in Awakino Point. And the Silver Fern is the only industry we have. The plant manager was there as well. There is a slip there, and I wonder if you have identified it or not. So on the river, there is a big subsidence thing, and that was probably the cause of flooding the Silver Ferns.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, look, I can talk to that one. That's nothing to do with the NTA. That's NTA do roading. We are
Emergency works I'm talking about, council, or is it NTA?
with the NTA. They're here for they're our roading authority. So we are aware of that subsidence in Awakino, and we've got a team working on that.
But there is more to it, Mr. Morris. It's not about that flip only. This whole area is blocked, which is, anyway, I'd like you to have a look at some point, Bernard.
We're working through that, Councillor Naya, and the NTA don't get involved.
Well, it has been such a long time. I'm not waiting for another flood. I'm not, no excuses for that, please.
Okay. All right, councillor Lambert.
If we didn't have this massive amount of rainfall this season, and we didn't have Gabriel, we'd have a maintenance program going on. Now that all the contractors have been taken out for this emergency works, is that maintenance program, I know you hide on it, that there's weather and conditions, but we get a feeling from our constituents that general maintenance has been overlooked and other areas are falling apart. Is that the case, or?
So through the chair, both the maintenance and construction seasons and available working windows have been massively hit this past year. So every time we have an event, we need to divert maintenance resources to respond, and generally that's 1 to 2 weeks. Part of the reason, or a large part of the reason for increasing local contractor component of the emergency works is to ensure that the maintenance contractors continue with their contractual obligations in terms of the maintenance programs moving forward. One of the big impacts consequential this year, so we lost the construction season, but also we had a very minor window for the rehabilitation of unsealed roads in the autumn season. So that program has had to be carried forward. We've got a large program of work scheduled for spring to try and get back into that. In terms of the maintenance activities themselves, the contractors have all been, they are all back to normal routine maintenance activities and working through the backlog now.
Good.
Carry on. Oh, councillor Howard.
Clarification on that last sentence you made. You said that we are through the backlog?
No, working through.
Working through, but to get to normal maintenance.
Through the chair, to clarify, they're working through the backlog of maintenance to get to the point where they are back at normal routine activities, noting that as previously mentioned, the current funding around some of those activities does not allow you to fix all defects on the network. So back to how just cross no more events, back to pre-June 2022 activities.
Thank you. Not a question really, but just to add to that, which I'm sure you're aware of, there's another compounding factor in the fact that it just keeps raining.
Yeah.
And there are more potholes and deficiencies happening. So while you're trying to catch up, where you're catching up to is still going to be miles than what you're normally doing. And I think there's probably a lot of communication that needs to go out to our residents about that.
Yeah.
I mean, because we drive across the district, we see it, whereas others may not and may not realise the huge amount of work that really does need to go into the roads. I feel a Wayne Brown quote coming on, it just needs to stop raining.
Howard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And following on councillor Aaron's comments there and where we were previously, one would never want to be, well, in fact, it's not my nature to be defeatist, but it's the reality of the sheer volume of work. Are we in any way looking at, if this continues, are we looking at a situation where we just, with the resource that we have and the funding, we just can't keep up? And I think that this comes back to the communication that we've got to make to our constituents. There is a reality to, we can keep chasing our tails and, I think that people appreciate that it takes time and there is the volume, but it is compounding all the time. And I just wonder whether in fact there is a reality that we're facing potentially, and that we have to consider some dialogue with community about, really the long-term lasting impact of this and what may not actually be fixed.
So through the chair, I believe most of you would have been circulated the press release we did about a month ago on across the region that's run in a lot of local papers, starting to set that expectation around emergency works and the fact that these programs are going to take multiple years to be resolved. We have recently reached out to all 3 district council comms teams and the regional council comms teams about coming together to strengthen the dialogue through multiple channels about the sheer impact of the recent, well, it's actually compounding events because there's the impact of the weather, the impacts of funding deficits and increasing escalated costs, the impact on some of our contractors of the 2 or 3 year restriction on immigration and how that has impacted the workforce. So all those things compounding lead to quite a problematic state. We're not defeatist by any means. We have some plans of how to move forward, but it is going to take time, and it is not something that councils are going to, I think I've said this a few times, it's not something we can maintain our way out of. And quite honestly, with the advocacy documents that we've been producing, it's not something that individual councils can afford to fix on their own. So those are things that there really needs to be some central government investment in helping to restore these works.
So as a supplementary, if I may, to that, is one of the compounding factors is that we made repairs. To me, the Brynderwyns is a classic example of this, but we've got them over on the east side and the little road. That we've made repairs, but actually we've made them in haste, and it's actually costing us. We've got a phrase that we're using more and more: do it once and do it properly. So, do you have now? Yes, you got pressure to get transport streams, transport lines open, but it's actually better to really take some time out and do a one-off bloody good repair, make sure it doesn't happen again. I use a classic example as the road just out of Mangawhai, heading south, just inside our border, unfortunately, where we've had, I think, in my time, just living there, 5 or 6 years, 3 subsidences now. Well, something patently is wrong with what we're doing. Now, we're just stuffing up all sorts of other work and repairs and return on investment by having to do this time and time again.
So through the chair, historically, the emergency works funding has been very strict on like for like replacement, effectively restoring the asset back to original state condition, which in a lot of cases where you knew potentially you fix that bit of slip and the next one down the road is going to go because you've strengthened that area, but haven't had funding to deal with it. The current funding goes a little way towards addressing that and the fact that the phrase that's being used is build back better in terms of the terminology. And that's part of our assessments, but it doesn't allow full upgrades of roads or areas. I think where those benefits are going to come is where we can identify through potential resilience funding externally to make improvements to corridors rather than just sites. And also, the sooner we can get on top of the drainage deficit backlog, the more we protect our assets.
Can I,
Thank you.
Councillor Larson, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah. Are you able to give an update on the Derricks Road Bridge? Because it's something we're going to get asked again very soon, I imagine.
So through the chair, I know we've had two, a design and a peer review. I'm not completely across where the peer review's at, but I'll get Dawn to follow that up outside during the day and see if we can get an update later on.
Just to be fine. Last time we heard there was geotech going on, that it might be straightened. We haven't heard anything since.
Yep, so we'll follow that up today through the chair.
You might have to be able to bring that in this afternoon with an update going. Got further presentation to make?
No, there were two slides. That was.
Okay. I think we can still pick this up later today as well, when we re-present. At this point, thank you very much, and we'll have a cup of tea and carry.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, yeah.
We'll turn the off.
Getting back on for you.
Thank you.